This unit is all about food, how we get our food, and what that has to do with the way that we live our lives, um, how different types of social organization are all based on the sort of production of food, the distribution of food, the consumption of food, which of course is my favorite. So let's start by talking about food foragers. Food foragers are also known as hunters and gatherers for reasons that you might imagine. They hunt and gather. This is the way that human beings have lived for most of our existence on this planet. Certainly for the first 100,000 years of our existence as Homo sapiens, we lived as food foragers. Now, these are two examples in the top row and bottom row of different types of food foraging. And these are, on the top row, these are the Jukwasi. And yes, it is a click language. Anthropologists have also called them Kung people, but they call themselves Jukwasi. Now, while you may think I am fluent in this language because of my ability to click, I am certainly not. I've practiced the clicks and just to be able to say some of the words. But in fact, click languages are some of the original languages. No language has ever adopted clicks later. So we know that languages that still use the clicks are some of the earliest languages that have been spoken and still are spoken on Earth. For the Jukwasi, who I'll also just call Jukwasi because it's hard to do the click every time, they have 4 types of clicks, starting from the front of the mouth, going to the back. And each of the clicks means something different, as if you said a different letter or a different sound. Or if you speak a tonal language like Mandarin or Vietnamese, for instance, if you go up or down with your tone, right, it provides a different meaning. So they have clicks that start here, like that sound, and then a palate click, a backwards palate click, which I can't do very well, and a one that's way back there, sort of in your epiglottis area. The Jukwasi are a group of people that have lived for millennia in the southern part of Africa. So South Africa, Botswana, around the area down there called the Kalahari Desert. And in the Jukwasi social organization, generally the men hunt and women are gatherers. Women bring in probably 70 to 80% of the food needs for the group, and men bring in the much prized but rarer meat that they hunt in the area. Now, since about the 1970s, the Jew or Jukwasi have been put on reservations similar to the reservations that we've created for our native peoples here in the United States. However, their populations have been sort of limited to a very small area of land. Well, in this way, it is still similar to our native reservations. The Jukwasi are, generally they are herders now. They also work in a money economy. They have, of course, joined the global capitalist economy, just like any other group in the world, and get very little of their food from hunting and gathering in their natal area, natal having to do with the place where they are from or of their birth. The Inuit, on the other hand, these are what we might call Eskimo, but Eskimo is one of those really contentious words that was created when, at least this is the legend, the story, which could be true, that people like explorers, when they were first visiting these areas, they would ask other peoples near to this group, what are those guys called over there? You know, the ones on the other side of the glacier. And those people would say, oh, they're called Eskimo. And Eskimo actually means raw seal meat eaters. So it wasn't a nice thing that they were saying. They were just sort of calling them a name, like, oh, they eat raw seal meat, like, ugh. So Inuit is one of these groups named for themselves. There are also other names like Inupiat or Inuktitut. Even though they have also adopted, in some cases, adopted the term Eskimo to refer to themselves, that's an imposed word, right? They don't call themselves Eskimo. So obviously, when you think about life of an Inuit person who lives in the tundra, right, very cold environments, they get most of their protein and most of their food from the sea, and do very little in the way of planting, but we'll also do things like trading for other items that they might need. So foragers have 6 basic characteristics. And again, the reason we call them foragers, what that term refers to is the fact that they're not farming, they're not exploiting the land for their purposes. They are seeking their food from what the natural environment provides. It doesn't mean that they're not engaging with or interacting with their environment in ways that eventually change it over time, because they are, and they do. And there have been studies to show that, for instance, people who live in the rainforest have actually shaped their rainforest in ways that support human life and also all life over millennia, even though they're not chopping down trees or necessarily planting crops. So the first characteristic of foragers to remember is that they live in small scale groups called bands. And a band is a group of people, usually about 30 to 50 people living together, sometimes a little smaller, maybe a little larger. But these are extended family groups that live together and move together to find resources. This young girl in the picture is a Hadza girl. Hadza people are also they're from East Africa, the area around Ethiopia, and she is snacking on some honeycomb, and they are known for their love of and consumption of honeycomb. There is a sexual division of labor among foragers, which means that in general, men hunt, and in general, women forage for plant materials. And I don't just mean nuts and berries, right? Usually we think of nuts and berries as, I don't know why, but we say this in English, as the things that people eat when they are eating off the land. But in fact, the foraging, in terms of gathering, the process encompasses many, many more types of food. In fact, the Jutwasi know how to identify and process and eat successfully over 90 different types of plant foods. So it's things, not only nuts and berries, but also things like roots that they dig up, that they can identify just from, whatever is on the surface, right? The branches or leaves on the surface. Also things like insects are also considered a gathering activity, not a hunting activity, because you don't need to hunt them too much, right? You just kind of pick them off the trees. Also things like wild vegetables and wild fruit. Of course, fruit is very sweet. It provides a lot of glucose, provides a lot of sugars, which provides carbohydrates and energy. People also eat things like honey, like eggs from nests. So there are a lot of other things that people can gather besides just the plant materials in their environment. Just because there is a sexual division of labor doesn't necessarily mean that women can't hunt. In fact, there are groups where women take dogs out and hunt, even when the women are, are with small children, it's safer for them the small children to be with the women hunting with the dogs than say back at the camp by themselves or with elderly grandparents. So number 3 is that foragers tend to be egalitarian. They don't have really any social classes, so they don't really have a lot of hierarchy. People don't have any status based on wealth because they don't have a lot of stuff, right? They move pretty frequently from place to place seeking resources in their environment. So they don't really carry a lot of stuff with them, right? Everything that can be carried is carried on their back in a pouch, maybe made of, traditionally made of an animal stomach or animal leather. Now today, probably made from canvas or vinyl or whatever they can purchase in a local shop. But the fact that they're egalitarian doesn't mean that some people don't have informal status, right? So some of the good hunters, or maybe someone who makes good decisions about where to go to find water, someone who is skilled at negotiating between people, these folks may have some informal status. But there are no social classes with, people who have a lot of things and people who don't. Although that changes, as people settle into these reservations and begin to hoard, not necessarily hoard, collect items, then we see more of a disparate social class beginning. Number 4 is that these are non-aggressive and cooperative peoples. Human beings have been cooperative basically for almost all of our existence until we started, again, settling into cities, into villages and then towns and then cities. And some of us could get more things than others. Some of us owned land and others couldn't. But until that point, we needed to cooperate to stay alive. So we would cooperate within our group and we would cooperate between groups, especially in terms of hunting and gathering and sharing that food for survival. Number 5, there's a lack of specialization within the group, which basically means everybody knows how to do everything else. So whereas the women in the group tend to be the ones to build the shelters and maybe make the tools, it doesn't mean that no one else can help, no one else knows how. Everybody pretty much knows how to do those things. But there aren't specializations like, let's say, writers and lawyers, where they only concentrate on those things and not on the subsistence needs of the group or how the group survives, right? What the group needs to survive, like we might have in an urban setting. And then finally, foragers are nomadic. So they move about every 3 to 5 days looking for resources. And they're not just wandering around. They know where their resources are in their environment. They've known it for thousands of years. They have particular water spots that they go to make sure that they're never more than a day's walk away from water. And being nomadic, it doesn't mean that, you don't know where things are and so you're wandering to find them. It just means that you don't stay settled in a village, that you set up camps as you walk around during the seasons, knowing where the food resources are during each season.